Hi class, and welcome to Chapter 37, Part 1 video notes. So we're still on the unit of ecology. However, we are starting a new chapter. So this is going to take a look at the community and the dynamics within communities. So 37.1 starts out, the community includes all the organisms inhabiting a particular area. So last chapter we talked about a population versus species, the differences between the two and how they're related. So now we're going back to the very beginning again about what a community is. So this is taking different populations living close enough to interact, and it's described by the species composition. So it doesn't have to be one species, okay? It's a bunch of different populations that are just living in close enough contact to interact. And the boundaries of the community vary, and it can be such like as a pond or intestinal microbes of pond organisms. So like when we went on the field trip, the area around the pond and including the pond would be a community. The ducks and the fish and all the living things in the lake are not the same species, but they're living close enough to interact. So they're a community. So interspecific interactions, these are fundamental to the structure of the community. The interactions are basically just relationships with other species in the community. So the ducks in the pond having a relationship with the turtles or the fish or all the different, or frogs, or all the different species that could be around. The interspecific competition are two different species that compete for the same limited resources. This can happen quite a bit. So it's not just like squirrels competing with other squirrels, but it could be squirrels competing with black bears for acorns. I don't know if you guys knew that black bears ate acorns, but a lot of times you have two species within a community competing for the same food or the same habitat, the same resource. Okay, so this chart, I want you to pause this and I want you to copy this chart down, okay? You don't have to use the example they give. We're going to talk about a lot of different examples when we get together in class, but you need to copy this table down. The interspecific interaction, the effects on species 1 and the effect on species 2. And I'm going to refer back to this throughout this video, so make sure you write it down and you look over it. Okay, so competition can occur when a shared resource is limited. So like we said before. So an ecological niche, okay, this is an extremely important term and you're going to see it throughout your biological career, whatever you choose to do. It's a term that basically sums up an organism's use of their living and non-living resources. So interspecific competition is going to occur when the niches of two populations overlap. Okay, so an example that we're going to talk about more in class is the competition between orange-crowned warbler and the Virginia's warbler. Okay, so a lot of times it will be like two species of bird, okay, that are competing for the same area within a tree. You know, they're competing for the same resources. A niche is basically like the home, the living space, and kind of like its job within the community. Okay, so if these niches overlap, those organisms are going to be competing for those same resources, and that can lower the carrying capacity of these specific populations, because if we have lower resources, there's more competition, then there's going to be a lot more animals that are not able to have their resources met. Okay, so then we're going to talk about one of the first interactions, mutualism. Okay, so too bad more communities can't have mutualism. One of the articles that I handed out for you all to read was about reef building corals and the algae that live within them. So these photosynthetic dinoflagellates live in these corals. They produce food that the corals eat and use. And then the corals, or the polyps is what they're called, they provide energy and protection for these photosynthetic dinoflagellates. So it's the algae living within the coral. The coral is able to provide the algae food and shelter, and in turn, the algae produces sugars that the coral can eat. So they're both benefiting by each other living, okay? And that algae lives within those polyps. So here's a picture of the polyps. And these are very cool. They're very sensitive. So if you go underwater, if you're ever snorkeling, and you touch the end of one of these, they suck in and basically like hide for protection. So the evolutionary connection. So we're going to talk a little bit about predation and prey, and how when one evolves, the other will evolve with it. So predation, one organism preying or eating another, benefits the predators but kills the prey. So for instance, you know, a lion eating a deer, or like the exercise that we, or the activity that we did on the field trip, the lions are going to benefit, but it doesn't benefit the deer. So prey, what they do is they begin to adapt. Okay, the species will evolve as a whole, not the individual, but as a whole, and they'll use these protective strategies to survive. And an example of this is camouflage, mechanical defenses, and chemical defenses. And let's take a look at some examples. Okay, so can you see what this is? This is a frog that has been, the species has evolved to be camouflage within its surroundings. So it's going to be a lot more difficult for the predator to come in and eat that prey. So it's a survival mechanism. And here's another example of poisons, toxins, so a chemical adaptation. So this is a poison dart frog that live in Costa Rica, and the predators know that this frog is poisonous. So they try to avoid it. It only takes one time of seeing their friend die from it, and they're like, not for me. Okay, so parasites. Parasites and pathogens is what makes everyone cringe, okay? So a parasite is something that lives on or in a host, and it takes up its nutrients from that host. Internal parasites include nematodes and tapeworms. I don't know if you know anybody who's ever had a tapeworm. They seem to be pretty common for humans to get. External parasites include mosquitoes and ticks, because a mosquito is landing on you, you're the host, and it sucks your blood. It gets its nourishment from you, and it's at the expense of the host. So the host is being harmed by this activity of the parasite. And then pathogens, we talked a little bit about this when we talked about DNA. Those are the disease-causing parasites. These pathogens can be bacteria, which are living, viruses, fungi, or protists. And these are going to make you sick. Okay, so the pathogens are benefited and you are harmed. So these parasites and pathogens can really affect the community composition. So non-native pathogens can have a rapid impact on the community. For example, American chestnut that we have locally has just been completely devastated by a protist called chestnut blight. And what they do is they get really, all these trees get really sick and they die. Well, as you know, trees take a very, very long time to grow and develop. So when they're wiped out, it's very detrimental to the community. So a fungus-like pathogen currently causing sudden oak death on the west coast. So this is, you know, right here in our backyard. Non-native pathogens can cause a decline of the ecosystem. So this protist that's destroying these chestnuts, it's going to completely decline or decrease this population of chestnuts. So now we're going to move a little bit from those relationships to the structure of a community. Okay, so trophic structure is a key factor. What a trophic structure is basically a pattern of feeding relationships, and it has several different levels. A food chain is a sequence of food that transfers up these trophic levels. So let's take a look at that real quick. So here is my food chain, okay, my trophic levels. See, yeah, always starts with the producer, it always starts with the plant, and then it goes up. Normally the organisms get bigger, however, that's not always the case. Okay, so producers, which I know this is a review for most of you. The producers, such as grass and flowers and anything that is makes its own food from the sun, is going to support all the other trophic levels within the community. Autotrophs, they are photosynthetic producers. Plants on land, cyanobacteria are photosynthetic bacteria that live within the water. So that's where our fish are going to start their trophic structure within like lakes and rivers and oceans. So consumers are anything that eats producers. So what we call those are heterotrophs. You're a heterotroph, I'm a heterotroph. So we have our primary consumers, which are going to eat the plants. Secondary consumers are going to eat your primary. Tertiary are going to eat your secondary. Quaternary are going to eat your tertiary, and so on. Okay, so it just goes up the chain of command. Then we have something extremely important to our environment and to nature and to the way of life is something called detrivores and decomposers. So they're going to take energy from dead matter and dead waste, and they're going to recycle those nutrients back into the environment. So when we were playing Oh Deer, when the deer died because it couldn't find its nourishment, such as its food, its water, its shelter, it became part of the land by being decomposed by a detrivore, and then it was able to have its nutrients from its body recycled. So here's that picture again of the trophic structure. And then food web, it's a lot like the trophic structure, except for it's interconnected. Okay, so see how there's different animals can eat more than one, and this is something that's kind of hard to talk about in a video and over a PowerPoint, but rather something that we'll discuss more in class, and we'll get tons of practice with this. So hopefully you enjoyed Chapter 37 Video Notes Part 1.